G'day, this is Mr. Thompson, and I'm going to help you a little bit with Excel, putting your ag science prac together. Now, I don't know much about ag science, but I do know a bit about Excel. So what we should do first before we start is think about what we're trying to achieve. So I guess the experiment that I'm going to do, which is probably different to your experiment, I'm going to pretend that I've got a whole bunch of different plants, and I'm going to see how much plant growth I get when I change the amount of water that I give to plants. So I'm going to set up a table that looks maybe a little bit like this one here. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my independent variable. Now my independent variable is how much water I give to the plants, so that's what I'm deliberately changing, and that'll go down in this column over here on the left hand side. The rest of the table here on the right hand side is all information about plant growth. So my independent variable down the left hand side, plant growth is the rest of the table. Okay, so my plant growth data is going to go into these cells here. So I'm going to have a whole bunch of plants, and I'm going to see how much those plants grow with different amounts of water, and my actual data will go there in the table. My next column that I want here is, once I've got my data, I want to get my average. So perhaps when my first row might be when I provided 10 mils of water each day, I had 4 plants, and what was the average growth of those 4 plants? So my averages will go in this column here. Now the next column I want is, I want to use standard error over here. So standard error tells me what was the spread of my data. So were all these all the plants, did they grow the same amount, or was there a wide spread in how much they actually grew? So that's the table that I want to design in Excel, and it's always a good idea to just do a sketch of the table before you start building in Excel, because it's a big mistake to go straight into Excel, because often you don't even know what you're trying to build. So if you don't know what you're trying to build, you won't know what you're doing. So so that's a bit of a sketch of the table that I'm going to use. You might just do that on a bit of paper. I'm also going to draw a sketch of the graph that I think I'm going to get. So my graph is going to look something like this. On my x-axis, my horizontal axis, I'm going to put my independent variable. So how much water do I supply? And then on my y-axis, my dependent variable, and that is how much did my plants grow. So plant growth will go up there. Now when I plot my points, I'm thinking I want to have some points plotted, and I'm going to want some error bars as well. So those points there, each of those points tell me the average plant growth for each amount of water, and the error bars will tell me how much spread is in my data. Were they all the same, or were the plants with that much water, was their plant growth all spread out? So I'm going to want some points there and some error bars, and I might even put in some sort of a trend line. So I think now I know what I'm trying to achieve. So having done that, let's go to Excel. Okay, so here we are in Excel. Now you know what? The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to save my file, so I can just save it regularly. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and you can choose where you're going to save it. Why don't I save on OneDrive, and I'm going to call it, let's call it Ag Science Spreadsheet. Okay, Ag Science Spreadsheet, save. Okay, and every few minutes or so, I'm just going to press Control S or go File, Save, and I'm going to save my file. So that's the first thing you want to do. All right, so let's build our spreadsheet. So let's give it a title, Plant Growth Data Analysis. That'll do. Okay, so I'm going to press Control B to bold that, Control B, and I'm just going to use my change the text size, make that a little bit big so it's a heading. All right, so let's look at our table. What do we want? Okay, so first we want amount of water, and of course we want the units for that, and that's milliliters. I'm going to use milliliters. I'm not sure what your independent variable is, but I'm going to use amount of water, and let's see how that goes. So down here then we want, I'm going to leave a little space there, and I'll show you why in a minute. I'm going to leave a space there. So down here we want the different amounts of water in milliliters. So let's just say for the first one I give 10 milliliters of water a day, then 20 milliliters of water a day, then 30, then 40, then 50, then 60. That'll do. I'm not sure how many different sets of data you're going to collect, but let's do that, and you can use more if you want. Okay. Now, you know what? Let's come over here. This next column, in fact, these next few columns are going to be plant growth data. So let's just type plant growth like that. Okay, and if I look at my sketch that I drew, I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want that plant growth heading to be 6 columns wide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to drag across there, and I'm going to merge and center plant growth there like that. Okay. Now these first 4 columns here, they're going to be my actual data. So what I'm saying here is I'm going to have for each different amount of water, I'm going to have 4 different plants. So here I'm just going to put plant growth data. So plant growth data, and while I've got those 4 selected, I'm going to merge and center those ones as well. Merge and center there. Okay, so plant growth, actually, you know what I should do? Plant growth, I'm going to measure plant growth in centimeters, so I should put the units there. That's good. And over here I want my average. So what if I just call that AVG so it fits, my average. And over here I want my error, my standard error. Standard error. Okay. Now, that doesn't look great, does it? Let's see if we can fix this up a little bit. First, what I'm going to do is, you know what? I'm going to join those 2 cells there together. So I'm going to merge and center there again. And that sort of spills over the edge there. So I'm going to wrap text. So if I click on wrap text, that's good. In fact, I still can't quite see everything. So I'm just going to make that column a little wider. So if I come up to here, up between the B and the C, see how the icon changes, and I can stretch that a little bit. There we go. So now my whole heading fits there. That's good. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I want to put some lines around all this. So let me just, I'm going to select my whole table like that. And let me come here and put some, I'm going to go all borders. All borders. Okay, so I've got some lines. In fact, you know what else I might do? I might put a big, fat, thick border all the way around the outside of my table like that. Okay, oh, I stuffed that up, didn't I? That row there shouldn't be, I'm going to delete that row. So I'm going to right click and delete that row like that. And let's do that again. Select the whole table, big fat border around the whole table. Yeah, that looks pretty good. In fact, while I'm at it, I'm going to put a big fat border around my headings. And I might even just change the color of my headings just a little bit. I might make them, I don't know, this is about plant growth, isn't it? So let's make it green, but just a very light green so it doesn't overwhelm everything. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I like to have all my cells so the data is in the middle of the cell. So again, I'm going to select my whole table and I'm going to click this center justify. So click it once. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted. Click it again. Okay, that's worked, hasn't it? See how everything now is centered? Okay, that works pretty well. I think now we're ready to put some data in. So I'm going to put some data in. I'm pretty quick at putting data in, so hold on. Okay, did you like that? Pretty quick, eh? All right, now, so I've just made that data up. You're going to have proper data that you've recorded, but that's just data that I've made up. As I said before, I don't know anything about ag science, so but I do know about Excel. So I've put some data in there. That will be your results from your actual experiment. Okay, so that's our actual data. So of course I've got, this shows me that I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 different plants that had 10 mils of water each day. And I had 4 different plants. These different plants here had 20 mils of water each day. And with 30 mils of water each day, we had these 4 plants. And the information here tells me how much they grew over a certain period. So maybe over a week or two. I don't know, whatever your experiment was. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to calculate the average for all of the plants that had 10 mils of water a day. So in other words, I want to calculate the average for all of those 4 plants. So what I'm going to do over here in my column that says average, I'm not going to get out my calculator. I'm not going to calculate the average manually. I'm going to do it with Excel. So I'm going to go equals. Now equals is what we type in when we want Excel to do a calculation for us. And for average, we just type average. So equals average, and then open brackets. And now I'm just going to click and drag. So click on my first number and drag, even though it's behind the text there, I've still dragged across all the cells that I want to average over. Now I'm going to close my brackets by putting a right bracket there and enter. Okay, and it's calculated the average for me. Now, here's a trick I can do. I can grab that, I can click on that cell that I've just calculated, and I want to do the same thing for the next cell, and the next cell, and the next cell. Now I could type equals average for the whole lot of them. I could do that, or I could just use this little trick here that I'm going to do. I click on the first average that I've calculated, and if I use the autofill handle, see if I grab the corner of the cell here and drag it down, drag all the way down there, that is going to put, now it's calculated the average for all of these. So it's calculated the average for these 4 sets of data, these 4 plants, and it's calculated this average here for these plants, this average here for these plants. Okay, so you can see it's done that. If you're not sure which cells it's calculated the averages of, you can just click on a cell and hit F2, and it shows you. See, it shows you that it's the average of all of those cells there. Okay, I'll just hit escape. Okay, so that's my averages done. Oh, now you might notice it's sort of stuffed up my formatting a bit. I'm going to leave that alone. I'll come back and fix up my formatting later. All right then, standard error. So what we want to do with standard error, well, firstly, what is standard error? I'm sure your teacher will explain what standard error is, but essentially standard error is a measure of how wide the data is spread. So you can see we've got a fairly wide spread of data here. We've got one plant that only grew 2 centimetres, and one that grew 14, and one that grew 11, and one that grew 12. So it's got a fairly wide spread of data, whereas this with 40 millilitres of water a day, we've got a narrower spread. So we need this standard error here gives us a measure of how spread out our data is. So the formula for standard error, it's a little bit complicated, but it's certainly easier than doing it by hand. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to type equals STDEV, that's standard deviation, .s. So stdev.s. And so that's, for those who want to know, that's the standard deviation for a sample. I'm going to open my brackets. So stdev.s, open brackets, and I want the standard deviation of all of those cells there. Close my brackets. Now I'm not finished. That's the standard deviation, not the standard error. Now I need to add some more information for the standard error. So I'm going to divide that by the square root. So for square root in Excel, SQRT is square root. The square root of, well, I want the square root of the number of plants that I'm including in my calculation. There are 4 plants there. So I could just type the square root of 4, but I'm going to be a little bit cleverer. And I'm going to say the square root of the count of, again, these cells. So I'm going to select those cells again. Okay. Now I need to close 2 sets of brackets there. So close one set of brackets, close another set of brackets, and that looks a bit complicated. There it is up there. So maybe you want to, if you maybe pause the video and write that down. That's what you've got to type in. Where this C5 to F5 business, that's just the cells that I selected. Again, the C5 to F5, that's just the cells that I selected. All right, so enter there. There's my standard error. So again, rather than type all that in, I'm going to drag it down. So I'm going to click my autofill handle and drag it down there like that. And that automatically then does it for all of these. Now, you might notice that my decimal points here are all over the place, aren't they? So I'm going to select I'm going to select all my averages first, and I'm going to adjust the decimal points. So if I come up here, I can increase or decrease my decimal points. In fact, what if I click here and I just change instead of general, I change to number, and it'll automatically put everything with 2 decimal points. See how my 6 before was just 6, and now it's 6.00. So that's a bit better, eh? You know what? I probably don't need 2 decimal places. You can have a chat with your teacher about how many decimal places you need. I'm just going to go with 1 decimal place. That'll do, I think. Now my standard error, again, let's see if I change that to number. You know what? 2 decimal places for my standard error seems pretty reasonable. In fact, yeah, I'm thinking I might even make that 1 decimal place as well. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. So standard error and my average, they look better now, don't they? Okay, now I'm just going to select that whole box again, and again I'm going to fix up my formatting by adding that thick outside border. There we go, and I fixed that up. Alright, so there's my data. Now we need to do a graph. Okay, so as with the table, it's a good idea when you're drawing a graph to start with a little sketch so that you know what you're after, you know what your end result is. So this is what we want to achieve, and we need to graph, or what do we need to graph? We need to graph the amount of water on the x-axis, and we want the plant growth data. In fact, what we really want is the average of the plant growth data on the y-axis. So if I come to Excel here, I'm going to click and drag that whole column there, which is my amount of water, and I'm going to hold down my control key on the keyboard, hold down control, and I'm going to now select the average as well. Okay, so by using that trick, holding down the control key, I've been able to select 2 columns there, and they're the 2 columns that I want my graph, to graph. So I'm going to come up here to insert, and I'm going to insert a chart. Now, we're not going to insert a line chart. We're going to insert an XY scatter plot. There is a difference, and most of the time in science, if you've got numerical data on both axes, which we have here, an XY plot is what you want, not a line graph. So I'm going to click on XY plot, and I'm going to choose this one here. I don't want to choose any of these ones with the lines and things. I can put a trend line in later if I want to. I'm just going to choose this one here that's just got the dots, and we'll put the line in ourselves later on. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to bring it over here so I can see my table and my chart easily at the same time. Just adjust the size a little bit there. All right. And look, it's already put the data on there, but we need to add a few other things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a meaningful chart title. So I'm just double clicking there where it says chart title, and I'm going to just delete the title it's got there, and I'll put my own title in. What will I call it? I'll call it the effect of water on plant growth. So some sort of meaningful title, so when somebody sees the graph, they'll be able to go, oh, I can see what that shows. Now, of course, we don't just need a title, we need axis titles as well. So we've got these numbers here, and we've got to work out, well, what do those numbers mean? So I'm looking at these numbers here. It looks to me as if these numbers down the bottom is the amount of water. That's great, because that's what we wanted, isn't it? It's a bit painful to try and swap them over. If you set up the table the same way I've set up the table, and if you follow the technique that I've used, you should find that it does this automatically. So if you have your X values over here and your Y values over here, it should automatically use that configuration, which is great. So I'm going to click somewhere on the graph. I'm going to click right over here, and there's that plus sign. So I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I'm going to add, I need axis titles. So I'm going to click that checkbox that says axis titles, and I'm going to double click in here on the axis title, Control A to select the whole text, and I'm going to, let's call that daily water supply. So how much water was supplied to each plant, and I need some units there, so in brackets I'm going to put in millilitres. That's how much water. So that was my independent variable. I'm going to come up here, And again, I'm going to double click and then F2 to select. Oh, actually that didn't work. Double click again. There we go. Double click in there, and it's a little bit tricky using the arrow keys because everything's sort of sideways, but I'm sure you can work it out. And we're going to call this one plant growth in brackets centimeters. Okay, so I've described what that axis means, and I've put the units in there as well, which is important. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, I believe you have to put error bars on your graph. So let's talk about error bars and how we're going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to use the standard error calculation. Well, the standard errors over here in this column here. We're going to use this column to create the error bars. Okay. Now, the error bars we want error bars that show the spread of data in the plant growth. The spread of data in the plant growth. Actually, strictly speaking, is not the spread of the data, it's the range that we're confident the average lies in. But let's not get into that. We'll just roughly call it the spread of data. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click on my graph again, and I'm going to click on plus, and I want error bars. Okay, and Excel's just put in error bars for me. Great, except they're not the error bars that I want. Those error bars have got nothing to do with the standard error here. So what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I don't really want these horizontal error bars. I only want vertical error bars. So I'm going to click on one of the horizontal error bars and see how that's highlighted the whole lot of them. And then I'm just going to press delete on the keyboard. Okay, my horizontal error bars are gone. Excellent. Now my vertical error bars, I've got to customize those error bars so that those error bars actually reflect the standard error that I've calculated. So I'm going to click on one, and you see when I click on one, it's selected the whole lot, which is good. That's what I want. Now I'm going to come over to here on the right hand side, and I'm going to format my error bars. So I'm going to come all the way across to this error bar options icon here, and come down to the bottom, and you know what? It says standard error. That's not the standard error we've calculated. Don't be confused by that. That's another standard error. I'm going to use custom because I want to customize their error bars according to my calculations. So I'm going to click specify value, and here we go. So this here is going to tell me, this will tell Excel how to calculate the error bars. So I'm just going to click delete to delete what's already in there, and then I'm going to come up here and select all of those standard errors. Okay, that's what I want Excel to use. Now, with my negative error value, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to click in there. In fact, I'm going to click on that little button there. Now, my Excel plays up a little bit. Your Excel, you can probably see some text in there. So delete all the text that's in there. And then once you've deleted all that text, then select your standard error column, the whole column again. Click here again and go OK. And now there we go, we've put the error bars in. So you can see, and they look about right too, because our biggest standard error, our biggest spread of data, is on our first row, and you can see that's got the biggest error bar. Let's look at down here. Well, there's our smallest error. So our smallest standard error gives us our smallest error bar down here. So that's worked quite well. All right. Look, the only other thing that you might want to do, and I'm not sure what you again, talk to your teacher about this, but I think we might put a trend line in there as well. So if I click on plus and add a trend line, click on trend line like that. Okay, that's added a straight line trend line. That might be what you want. Again, talk to your teacher about that, what you want. I'm going to change it to a more curved trend line. So if I double click on the trend line itself, then I can come over to here, and it gives me some options. So if I click on the right hand one again, I can choose, you know what I can do? I can just click on these options and go, don't like that one. What about that one? No, that one doesn't look particularly good. That looks fairly good, doesn't it? That's put a polynomial order 2 trend line. That's tried to match a parabola. That works pretty well. So I'm going to do that. Now, again, talk to your teacher about what sort of trend line you should put in. So there we go. And that looks pretty good, doesn't it? I think that's the end of the video. I hope that's been helpful.